Major Carter Wallace's blood ran cold as the blinking red threat indicator revealed a chilling truth. The Dilrathian war fleet had locked onto Earth. Wallace would teach the aliens why you never make humans angry. Swallowing hard, Wallace opened the classified Pegasus file, praying its frightening potential could save humanity from the coming storm. But with Dr. Helen Liu missing, he knew time was running out. Failure meant extinction at the hands of the galaxy's most vicious race. The Major's fingers trembled, even as his resolve hardened. Project Pegasus had to be completed before the Dilrathian teeth closed around mankind's throat. The shuttle shook as Wallace guided it to Mars. On the moon below, the once peaceful human base exploded with Dilrathian lasers. Wallace clenched his jaw, watching Armstrong Base burn. The base went silent, floating debris marking where people had lived. On Earth, crowds stared at screens in horror. Some cried, some shouted, but most just felt numb as they realized Earth was now exposed. At the Mars station, red dust swirled, erasing signs of Dr. Liu. Her lab lay destroyed, equipment torn out, papers scattered. Ivan Chen searched Liu's overturned office. He found a datapad and his face lit up. "I'm in," he said, showing Wallace the screen. Liu left a backup plan. The coordinates led to an asteroid field, uncharted by humans or Dilrathians. In those rocks might lay the key to human survival or extinction. The crew set the new course, feeling the weight of their decisions. As they left Mars, Wallace glanced back at Earth and whispered a promise to protect humanity, as a man, not just a major. "We're coming for them." Wallace's ship broke through the belt of rocks and ice circling an invisible center. His eyes fixed on the scanner, watching blips of asteroids drift across. Nothing else appeared. Then a shimmer against blackness. A structure flickered into view, bending light cloaking it. The asteroids hid Dr. Liu's fortress. "Lockdown," Wallace muttered as he reached the sealed gates. Silence deafened in the void. He signaled the bunker. Static. He tried again. Finally, a crackle responded. The doors hissed open, spewing dust. Dr. Liu emerged, blaster ready, scanning for threats. "It's me, Wallace." He raised his hands. Dr. Liu lowered the blaster slightly. "Wallace? We need you. Earth nears the edge. The Dilrathians target us." Her face shifted, suspicion to dread to determination. "Follow me." Their steps echoed down metal corridors to the core. Project Pegasus loomed inside, steel and wires encasing its giant shape. "Pegasus?" Awe and fear tinged Wallace's voice. "The only hope left," Liu replied, hands on the cold metal. "A gravity weapon, but it's dead. They have the core." Wallace nodded. "The isotope." She looked fierce and resolved. "Yes, the isotope." Wallace knew his task. "I'll retrieve it. That core is our only shot." Liu turned to her console, fingers dancing. "I'll prepare. Time runs short." Asteroids passed outside as they left the hidden base. Wallace focused his mind on plans and tactics. They set course for the Dilrathian base. The hunt had begun. Wallace and Chen pulled the Dilrathian cloaks and armor tight across their bodies. They crouched over the stolen ship. Enemy emblem burned into the metal. A reminder of the danger ahead. Titan loomed, the enemy base, shrouded in war industry and thick mists. "The core's gotta be here," Chen whispered, scanning for signs of the isotope. Wallace grunted, feigning calm. The ship hit Titan with a dull thud, ramp lowering. They stepped out into swirling chaos. The hive of enemy dealers, bartering, clinking metal. Sounds echoed off stronghold walls. "Stick together," Wallace muttered, eyes hidden under his helmet. He led the way through walkways and alleys, a maze of metal and suspicion. Eyes watched them from all sides. But they pressed on, Chen's fingers dancing over his datapad, hacking security systems and protocols. Their disguises held, fooling even the hawk guards. The vault loomed closer. Chen's pad beeped, the final barrier breached. The heavy door slid open, silent and smooth. The core pulsed inside, the heart of Project Pegasus, their only hope. It sat caged in energy fields and locks. Wallace watched the maze of alleys while Chen worked fast and precise. A soft click, the energy cage gone. Got it. Quiet triumph in Chen's voice. They wrapped the core in a plain bag, hiding its worth from prying eyes. Alarms blared as the door slammed shut. The stronghold erupted in chaos, harsh clicks and shouts. They ran, the core heavy between them. Laser shots sizzled by, one grazing Wallace's helmet. Chen dodged a guard's tackle, barely avoiding capture. They weaved through the frantic crowd, footsteps loud and breaths heavier. The ship's ramp waited ahead. They dove in, sealing the door tight. Chen gunned the engines without hesitation. The ship jerked skyward, away from Titan. Course set for Earth. Chen wiped his brow, exhaling hard. Wallace gripped his chair, knuckles white. The angry Dilrathians chased them through space, back to Earth, either triumph or doom. Each tick of the clock counted down. Dr. Liu's fingers pounded the keys as she awoke the dormant Pegasus. The steel room vibrated with energy as the machine came alive. Wallace stared, pulse racing. He grabbed the comm. Evacuate everyone underground now. Pegasus is live. The warning shot to Earth. Cities emptied as people scrambled below ground. This was no drill. In the steel chamber, the Pegasus awoke. Lights flickered. Symbols scrolled the screens. It stretched across the room, steel and wire merging with raw energy. Above Earth, the Dilrathian ships swarmed, blotting out the sun. Fear filled human eyes below as shadows spread. Wallace watched the screens, chest tight. The alien ships approached, ready to attack. He nodded to Liu. Now. The Pegasus core blazed with light, energy building. A beam fired into space, invisible but deadly, slicing through the vacuum. The lead Dilrathian ships shook, armor crumpling. Steel twisted, air hissed into space as gravity became executioner. The unstoppable fleet halted. Confusion filled Dilrathian channels. Panic replaced precision. Shouts replaced orders. War had turned against them. Hit them again, Wallace commanded. His order shot through human channels, igniting resolve. The gamble worked. Pegasus thrummed, loosing another beam. It struck ship after ship. The Dilrathians scrambled, hierarchy collapsing. In shelters below, people held each other, praying for those above. On Wallace's ship, activity surged. Chen tracked targets. Liu managed the weapon's power, each gravity blast a cry of defiance. Humanity's voice rang out, "We will not go quietly." Carter flipped on his comm to the whole fleet. "Everyone, follow me." His ship roared as they moved fast with Earth behind them. Terran pilots bunched close, engines shrieking, fear and grit in their bellies. The Dilrathian ship spun about now, no longer a single cold threat. Wallace's cockpit shook from a near-enemy shot. Damage was light. His hands tightened on the stick. "Rip them up." Carter's voice stayed steady across the void. Terran ships sliced through with fire behind. Dilrathian cruisers fired calculated beams, but the tremor from Pegasus had shaken them. Human fighters dodged and ducked, knowing Earth was home. Dilrathians scrambled to counter the new human defiance from the gravity weapon. Carter checked the screen with all the blips, friends, and enemies. Each hit on the Dilrathians felt good for a second before the next target. Chen's voice buzzed through chaos. "Carter, new intel here." "Report," Carter grunted, eyes on the Dilrathian guns. We got more coming. A huge new wave. The main force. Gut punch. Carter's stomach dropped. Battle rush now ice. This was just the start. We're low on time, Chen said, voice as grave as the news. Carter glanced at Earth again. Got it. He breathed deep, steadying his voice. Options, Chen. Fast as you can. A sharp breath came through. On it. Stand by. The Terrans had felt strong with Pegasus, but now saw the shadow arriving. Every pilot's will tested, preparing to face the foe they'd just beat back. Carter's fist tightened, giving the order. All ships, keep hitting them. Protect Earth no matter what. The weight of humanity on him, Carter readied the fleet for the storm ahead. The battle for orbit burned on, and for now, humanity's defiance shone against the dark. Wallace froze, eyes glued to the holographic swarm cascading the command center. His heart pounded, nearly drowning Chen's cracked voice on the intercom. We're outgunned, Major. The Dilrathian fleet just jumped in. He looked to Dr. Liu, her face grim. We can't take another hit. No options left, she said, fear and resolve in her voice. Wallace paced, boots clanging the metal floor. Suggestions? Pointless. His gut knew the answer. Liu's fingers hovered over her console, thinking. One thing. Recalibrate Pegasus to create a singularity. Trap them. Her eyes met his, the weight of it clear. A black hole? No betrayal in his voice, just a storm in his mind. That's a one-way ticket. One fraction off. The room waited, every tech, every officer for his call. He knew the hole might swallow them all, Earth too. That or sit and die. Fists clenched, the decision landed. Sacrifice all on a sliver of hope or watch humanity die. He looked to Liu. Do it. We're all in. Chen cut in, rushed static voice. Patching through now, but the drain will be massive. Minutes at most. Understood. Evac pods, full protocol now. Orders bounced round the chamber, action erupting. Liu's fingers danced across her keyboard, calculations flowing fast. Pegasus groaned, systems redirecting, metallic roar within. Wallace stood with Liu, eyes on Earth's marble, his home, a gambler's move, all in bet. He held his breath, waiting. The Dilrathian ships neared, weapons aglow with hate, no idea what was coming. Pegasus shuddered, core flaring, point of no return. The weapon pulsed, space torn, ravenous and endless. Silent void, the horizon expanded, pulling the swarm into darkness. Ships fired blind, swirling doom to the deep. Evac now! No time to watch. Crew scrambled, fear-fueled pods bursting free. Last to leave, Wallace looked back. The hole grew, the Dilrathian dots disappearing. He sprinted to his pod, Earth in the balance, bet laid bare against the stars. The hum of machinery in Pegasus control rose to a growl as energy levels peaked. Screens blinked out one by one, plunging the room into ominous red emergency lights. Below, cities blacked out. Street lamps died. Families gathered outside, staring up at a starless sky. Whispers of worry rippled through the streets. In control, Wallace's crew bent over their stations, fingers flying over keyboards. Numbers and equations flashed as they raced the countdown. Sweat dripped from their foreheads. There, one said, tapping the screen. A hologram of Earth and the enemy fleet swirled into view. The sweet spot. Faces set, the crew nodded. Wallace barked the order to lock coordinates, hand braced on a console, his only anchor. Over the radio, his voice rang out steady and clear. This is Major Carter Wallace. People of Earth, we face our darkest hour. His address filled silent homes with resolve, unity, courage. Families clutched hands, drawing strength from his words. In control, calculations complete, the crew exhaled as one. Wallace nodded, gave the command. Pegasus awoke with a roar. The dance with destiny began. The red warning lights flashed in Pegasus control. Crew members hunched over screens, faces tense. Major Wallace stood stiff, watching Pegasus power up. Numbers flashed as the machines hummed. Outside the viewport, space pulsed. "Start the sequence," Wallace commanded. Dr. Liu nodded and moved her fingers over the panel. The sequence initiated. Space twisted and distorted outside as reality warped. The Dilrathian ships appeared in formation, weapons ready. Then the distortion grabbed them, sending the ship spinning wildly out of control. The once mighty fleet now helpless chunks of metal and panic. "Singularity forming," a technician shouted. "Growing fast!" Wallace stared out the viewport. The black hole emerged, bending starlight around its hungry maw. Dilrathian ships spiraled toward the event horizon, vanishing one by one. Dr. Liu's voice remained steady. "Stabilizing singularity. Constraining growth." But the Earth reacted. The ground shook, buildings swayed, glass shattered, oceans heaved, waves crashing higher on shores. Technicians shouted commands to adjust Pegasus. Major Wallace stepped closer to the window as if he could restrain the force they created. "Keep it tight. Can't let it grow." On Earth, people clung together, eyes turned skyward toward unseen heroes. In control, Wallace grabbed the readout, scanned the numbers. He fired orders rapidly. "Divert power there. Constrain field here." Dr. Liu responded immediately, fingers always moving. The machine's roar steadied. Lights flickered less. The tremors slowed. In the red glow, Wallace, Liu, and the team leaned over their stations. Each command entered meant survival or annihilation. The black hole loomed, a weapon against odds. The fight continued, success and ruin balancing like Earth's fate itself. The red glow from control lit up our faces. We stood frozen as the last enemy ship spun and crunched in the gravity we unleashed. Wallace gripped the console, watching the display as the singularity shrank back to empty space. "Status," he said, voice tight. Reports flooded the room. "Singularity gone, sir. No more enemy ships." No cheers, no relief. The price stared back on the screens, power lines flickering out, cities fallen silent. Wallace surveyed our drawn faces. We had survived, but at what cost? He turned to the viewport, Earth scarred below by victory. Dr. Liu touched his shoulder. "We did what we must," she said, almost believing it. He nodded once. "What now?" No one could answer. Grids to repair, cities to rebuild, lives lost forever. Earth was safe, they said, but hollow, changed. Talk turned to repairs, to rebuilding something stronger. We would live on. Days later, ceremonies filled the silent cities again. Speeches honored the living and the dead. They called Wallace a hero. Medals weighed on him like shackles. He faced the crowd, faces marked by survival, united as one. Earth had changed. Together they clawed back from oblivion. "You call me a hero," he said, voice carrying, "but it was all of us, our choice, our will to live." They nodded, resolve hardened into bone. Earth would not forget, humanity would not forget. They had stared down ending and held strong. They learned a new truth: never anger humans. Wallace carried it all: the cost, the courage, the hollow victory, the enduring will. Earth seemed fragile now, precious, a planet of survivors, of fighters. He looked upward, where the stars watched and waited. The war room stank of old coffee and fear. They had no time to clean the energy bar wrappers from the last crisis. Now the generals in suits snarled at each other instead of the aliens. Wallace leaned against the wall, arms folded, eyes narrowed as shouts echoed off cold metal. A general slammed his fist on the table. "We need Pegasus ready," he barked at the diplomats. "The next threat could come any time." A diplomat glared back, voice icy. "And risk another black hole? We got lucky." Chairs scraped as people stood, sat, paced. The room crackled with tension. Wallace's gut churned as he watched them. The threat came not from alien guns, but the crack in human bonds. Pegasus had united them. Now it could tear them apart. Later in the quiet lab, Liu's fingers hovered over Pegasus's controls. Her eyes were hollow. "It's too dangerous, Carter," she murmured over the cooling hum. Wallace nodded. "We can't gamble lives twice." They shared understanding. He gave her a small drive. "This will disable it. Wipe it clean." She hesitated before taking it. She plugged it in. The hum slowed. Lights dimmed as the weapon powered down. They watched, holding breath as Pegasus went silent. "It's done," Liu said, removing the drive. "Pegasus is gone." The weight lifted from Wallace, if only a bit. "We can't be our own enemy." She nodded, ghost of a smile on her lips. "We did right." They left the lab, the world still whole. What they'd done would change humanity's course someday. For the better. Wallace and Liu entered the cold, wet concrete tunnel. Their breaths puffed out in the cold air. Liu held a stolen security device. "Damn," Wallace whispered. "They know." Liu nodded, eyes on the plans. "We move. Now. Sector C. Forgotten access." Boots echoed above. Wallace signaled silence. They pressed against the wall, hidden in darkness. Soldiers stomped overhead, voices muffled. "Find Wallace. Pegasus is ours." A look between them said it all. They weren't friends now. They hurried on, quiet steps on concrete. Liu's device glowed, showing pipes and wires. "Left here," Liu pointed. Around the corner, two armed guards talked urgently. Liu's fingers danced. Lights flickered out. Guards startled, confused. Wallace and Liu raced past, steps hidden by ventilation noise. They emerged outside, sucked in the fresh night air. Stars above, dry grass below. The rusty hatch was behind them. They stayed low, moving toward trees. Wallace felt the watching satellites, invisible threats. A siren wailed back at the concrete buildings. "They found the tunnel," Liu said evenly but urgently. "Keep moving," Wallace replied, scanning for threats. A drone buzzed overhead. Wallace pulled Liu into rock shadows. "Tracking us," he said, watching it. Liu aimed a device, clicked. The drone spiraled and crashed in the dark. They used the trees as cover. Danger wasn't over. Checkpoints, drones, infrared, all threats. They reached an old road, cracked by tree roots. Headlights approached from the east. They ducked into brush, hidden. A transport rolled past, slowing, moving on. Wallace gripped his hidden weapon. No shooting unless necessary. They crossed the road, vanishing into trees. Night cloaked them, but not forever. Wallace knew they needed a plan, somewhere safe. They headed for the distant city lights, cover and options. Liu checked her security device, now a city map. "Scramble their surveillance from a hub," she said. "Buy time." Wallace's pulse sped up. The concrete and steel jungle had danger everywhere, but it was their only chance. They moved in silence, determined. Each step took them deeper into the chase. This was a game of survival, all in. Chen disappeared 3 days ago. No word from him. We scoured the city camera feeds, hacked all the systems we could. Nothing. Then we got the proof. Grainy video showed Chen strapped to a chair, sweaty hair stuck to his forehead, bruises on his face and arms. Some guy was grilling him with questions. "What's Pegasus?" The guy slapped Chen hard across the face. Chen's head jerked to the side, blood dripping from his mouth. He said nothing. Eyes closed, then opened again, defiant. "Where's Wallace?" Another slap, harder. Chen's head sagged. He spit blood on the floor. "Go to hell." Liu watched the screen, fingers shaking. Guilt filled her eyes. "It's my fault. I built Pegasus." Wallace saw the video too, jaw tight, guts twisted. But he kept steady. "It's on me too," he said. Shut off the screen to face what was left of the team. "We can't fall apart now. Chen's tough. He's one of us, and we're still here." Wallace's voice cut through the quiet room. Young hacker Elsie pulled her sleeves over her hands, restless. "They'll keep coming after us. Chen knew the risks, like we all did." Liu whispering now. "This is too much. Not what we signed on for." Wallace moved closer, looked her straight in the eyes. "You built a weapon to protect us, to give us a chance. We owe it to Chen and the others who fought to finish this. I need you, Helen." She nodded, slow. "To stop Pegasus." "Yes." Wallace held her gaze. "We keep moving forward." Liu closed her eyes, took a deep breath. "For Chen. For all of us." In the corner, Rios fiddled with his headset, cracked a weak joke to cut the tension. Wallace turned to him, nodded once. "We've got one shot here. They took Chen, but Pegasus is still ours. Liu, Elsie, I need you digging into those camera feeds. Rios, jam their communications. Chen didn't break yet. We do this for what we can still do." Rios got to work fast, fingers flying over the controls. Wallace studied the map, all the routes in and out, each one life or death. "We move at night. New identities, new faces. They tried to scare us into giving up. We're going to prove them dead wrong." Liu traced a path on the map with her finger. "Underground. They won't see us coming." Elsie nodded, strength returning. "We'll get Chen back. And end this. For Chen. For Earth." Wallace's voice rose, filled the room. The team exchanged a silent promise in their eyes. Mission clear. The enemy had Chen, but he wouldn't break. And neither would they. Not while they still breathed. Wallace grabbed his coat. "Let's move out." As one, they wiped their stations, geared up. Liu took one last look at the empty room. Then they melted into the shadows. The night air was cool, stars indifferent. But they had a mission, a hope. That was enough. The waiting tired us, trapped with Pegasus at the center. No choices seemed safe now. But then the cell cracked open a bit. Prisoners huddled in the stinking cage. Their own kind marked them for death, left them here, forgotten. But then Earth's fight echoed even here. These captives, scarred from battle, eyes empty from loss, heard how humans faced the end, heads high, refused to break as their planet shook. One prisoner stood, jagged scar on his jaw. He went to the energy bars, their hum a song of captivity. "I've seen the weapon work," he rumbled, the translator at his neck shaping his words. "It scares me. Should scare you too." They knew Pegasus, the black holes it birthed, knew the line between life and death that humans walked. These warriors, born for conquest, understood wielding what you dread. "We must act," said one, on his feet now too. They gathered, scales etched by the same fear, saw stars bleed from the sky, their own vanished into nothing. "We can help the human," Scarface declared. "Share what we know, find weakness, map their hiding holes." And so, when the next guard shift came, they stepped forward, not demanding but offering, "We'll help end Pegasus." Wallace got the news in a bunker, screens flickering, power low. He listened to the offer detailed, eyes hardened at Pegasus, shoulders heavy with the weight of command, long silence before a sharp nod. Set a meeting. Careful. His voice gravel rough from no rest. At the hangar rendezvous, Wallace met Scarface. No handshake, just mutual nods. They knew the crisis binding them. "We share fear," Scarface rumbled, eyes locked on Wallace's. "Pegasus too strong, unchecked, dooms us all." Wallace's lips thinned. "Needs permanent disable." Plans covered the table between them. Maps, codes, timing in place of distrust. The prisoners offered inside knowledge, ways in and to the control room unseen. Hours passed. Night came. Each nod and grunt sealed agreement. Infiltrate the maze where Pegasus lies dormant. Cut power, erase codes, dismantle the beast piece by piece. At meeting's end, Wallace extended his hand. Not allies, but warriors recognizing each other. Scarface met his clawed grip, understanding sealed. The plan moved now, once enemies, now partners to silence the storm. Wallace left the hangar burden still on him, but edged with new determination. Battle lines redrawn, humanity and old foes united against shared threat. Final push now, for a future with no shadow of a weapon too terrible, for the right to wake to mornings untainted by oblivion's threat, to remember humanity's strength is tenacity, not weapons. Boots hit the ground as Wallace's team spilled from the transport, guns up, eyes sharp. Dilrathian defectors moved with them, once foes, now allies. They spread out, quiet signals between them. Armor patched together, human and alien tech, ready for the fight. Wallace stepped forward, a commander at the front, his eyes on the towering walls ahead, movement on the parapets, shapes taking positions. A shout rang out, alien words through the air. Then it started, a single shot, a Dilrathian rifle barked. Wallace's team returned fire, blasts and pops, human and Dilrathian weapons, an echo of the past war. Energy discharges filled the air, light splashing the walls. Explosions rumbled as charges blew holes. They pushed through debris, shooting and moving. A relentless machine of war. Wallace led from the front. A blast came close. Heat shield flared. He pushed through, relentless, his team behind. Each step contested, under fire. Inside now, the smell of ozone and burned metal everywhere. Dilrathian and human shouts as they advanced the corridors. They reached the core. Steel walls, heavy machinery hummed, powering Pegasus. Wallace entered, rifle scanned for threats. None left standing. His team at the entrance, rifles on the doors, waiting for more. Dilrathians checked consoles, hands moving fast, looking to lock down. Wallace stood before the silent core. Distant gunfire echoed, low thrum of the machine. He took a breath, steeled himself. Battle sounds grew fainter, or was it his blood rushing? His hand hovered over the button. He could end it with one push. A quiet so deep the universe held its breath. He thought of Earth, green forests, sprawling cities, murmuring voices. Their peak or their pit? His choice. Wallace pressed the button. A shudder ran through machine, floor, him. A light turned red, blinking. Pegasus had brought salvation and sorrow. Now it would sleep. The facility trembled as the device wound down. His team waited to withdraw. They walked the torn halls, the fallen around. Outside, a black sky dotted with stars. They left Pegasus behind, chapter closed. Consequences would come, fallout. But for now, they had Earth, scarred but alive, defiant. Wallace walked into the night, ready for the dawn. Wallace's boots pounded the floor as Pegasus broke apart with a screech and crunch of metal. His team sprinted through the shaking halls. Cracks burst walls. Beams screeched and bent. The ceiling rained dust and electric wire. "Move! Move!" Wallace yelled. His team pushed forward through sparks and falling debris, humans and Dilrathians together. They knew the end of an era came with Pegasus's death. The core collapsed with a thud. Darkness swept the halls. Walls tumbled in a cascade of stone and steel, burying Pegasus in its tomb. They reached the exit as supports collapsed, burst outward in an eruption of heat, rubble, and dust. Dove and barely escaped. Gasping and dirt-stained, they picked themselves up. Wallace scanned the horizon as dust settled over the silent ruins. "Pegasus is gone," a Dilrathian said. "We've lost much." Wallace's voice rasped, filled with exhaustion and grief. "But we had to. No other way." They nodded, faces telling stories of sacrifice to save their worlds. They looked upon the alien landscape of twisted metal and stone. Earth's factions, minutes ago enemies, now united in a future without Pegasus, a future unknown. Their struggle brought them to the brink, now seen as futile. "We find a new way," Wallace said. His team stood ready for what came next. The settling dust seemed to sweep away their old lives. With Pegasus gone, all tread an untrodden path, away from war's shadow and into a light of their own making. Chen came out of the shadows. His face was cut up bad. He was all bandaged from the fight. Nobody cheered when they saw him. They just stared, waiting. Wallace watched as Chen walked back into the bunker. The light was dim. "You look rough," Wallace said. He tried to smile. Chen gave a half grin. "Feels like hell got me and let me go," he said. "We were worried," Wallace said. His voice sounded relieved. He grabbed Chen's shoulder, friendly-like. "Tell me, what'd you say to them?" "Lies and tricks," Chen said in a scratched-up voice. "Sent them running nowhere." Everybody got what he meant. Chen's lies bought them time. "Sit down," Liu said. She moved quick and quiet, pulled out a medical kit from the shelf. Wallace watched Liu fix Chen's cuts. Her hands worked steady, but her eyes looked tired deep down, the kind of tired that doesn't wash off. "How'd you do it?" Wallace asked. Chen shrugged, then winced when Liu cleaned a bad gash. "Told them I was the boss. Had them thinking you just followed orders." Liu glanced at Wallace. They both knew the price they paid for their roles. Chen never broke under the pressure. He kept them safe. Chen leaned back as he relaxed finally. "They believed it all," he said stronger. "Gave you the time you needed. Protecting the plan was all I could think about." Liu finished bandaging his arm and stepped back. She looked at her work. "You've done enough, Ivan. More than enough," she said, firm but gentle. Wallace watched as Liu walked away without looking back. Her shoulders were stiff. She was done with the fight. "Where's she going?" Chen watched her go. Wallace sighed understanding and regret. "Away from this," he said. "She's carried this from the start. Now she wants to put it down. We all do, our own way." Chen nodded, eyes closed to rest. Wallace left him be, knowing Chen earned a rest. Outside, Liu walked alone. She got smaller on the ruined land. The woman who shielded humanity now sought a different comfort, maybe in the quiet rebuilding of their broken world. Liu walked further from the bunker, the machines, the war. She walked toward the wrecked world that needed healing hands, not fighting hands. Her path was her own now. Each step a promise to find the peace she helped win, but barely felt. The sound of machinery filled the air as robots and humans hoisted concrete slabs together, working side by side amid steel beams that stood where ruins once lay. Sweat and grease-stained faces showed the hard work, but eyes shone, not with fear but with purpose. Major Carter Wallace stood on rubble, a rubble pile that was once a blockade. He held a clipboard now, not a gun. His finger moved down the list of supplies needed for the day's work. "We need more girders on the west side," he called out. Tarek, a former prisoner turned ally, easily lifted heavy equipment and gently set it next to the human crew. They nodded thanks. "Used to aim those at you," he said, gesturing to the tools now used for building. Wallace chuckled softly. "Glad you're with us now." A look passed between them, speaking of an unlikely friendship formed from necessity and growing in this new world they built together. Nearby, children laughed and chased a makeshift ball, a reminder that life went on, that not all was lost. They played by a simple monument honoring those fallen, reminding the living of the cost of peace. Wallace entered the community center where meetings happened now. Voices buzzed as plans were made for a school. All had a role, all had a say. He stood in back, listening to ideas for sharing books, knowledge, garden seeds. A woman stood, boots dirty, voice firm. "Let's focus first on food. Together, we can feed all this winter." Wallace watched with pride, not from winning battles but from these acts of unity. The commander became a listener, a pillar for others to lean on. At sunset, fresh paint glowed on homes. Laughter sounded from a shared meal where humans and Dilrathians talked and broke bread. A simple yet profound act of peace. Wallace joined them, eating modestly, listening more than speaking. His wisdom sought not for strategy but for steering conversation, for nurturing hope. "What do you think, Wallace?" a woman asked, holding a tattered map. "Where to plant the orchard?" He studied it as he once did enemy positions. "South side. More sun," he suggested, knowledge now applied to growing. Nods and murmurs followed. Someone passed him a dish in thanks. He accepted, this role as peacemaker far from the soldier he was, yet it felt right. As families left for home, lights flickering on in structures of resilience, not war, Wallace lingered under emerging stars. He listened to a world healing, the promise of a future built not by those taken but by those saved. The grand hall was filled with the low hum of talking as people from around the world came into the new United Earth Parliament building. The walls were made of see-through steel and the floors from recycled wood. Every step echoed a promise for the future. Major Carter Wallace's boots echoed as he walked across the shiny floor toward the high table for the leaders of the new government. This wasn't a strategy room. It shone bright, holding up everyone's hopes. His chair sat empty like it knew he didn't fit in. It looked more like a throne than a seat for service. He glanced at the emblem over the big entrance, a globe circled by olive branches. It was new, but stood for an old idea, unity. As Wallace moved through the crowd, heads turned. Whispers followed him. He was the soldier, the hero of Pegasus. Now he stood at the start of political work. "Major Wallace, welcome," a formal, cool voice greeted him. It was Ambassador Zhang, crisp suit and datapad in hand. "Thank you, Ambassador," Wallace replied. His voice hinted discomfort with the formality and shiny shoes. Zhang motioned to the high table. "Your experience will be invaluable here," he said. His eyes glinted like those used to manipulating. Wallace took his seat. The leather felt cold and unwelcoming. His fingers brushed the smooth table, nothing like the rough grain of the front lines. The session began, voices rising and falling. Deals were made, futures drawn in loose words. But as power plays came up, Wallace felt a twinge in his gut, the soldier in him pulling back. His voice cut through the murmurs, strong and sure. "We're here to make sure Pegasus stays a lesson, not a step for the next domination force. We can't forget the price we paid." Silence fell for a moment, all eyes turning to him. Some agreed reluctantly, some genuinely. He continued, "We must be different. We can't just replace the tyranny we fought with another. Unchecked power could undo us." Wallace's words weighed down the room, pushing back the greedy ambition threatening to rise. Zhang nodded slowly, agreeing with a dip of his chin. Wallace had earned his place at the table, not just by what he'd done, but what he stood for, and he would stand firm on the new battle's front line, for Earth's soul. With clenched jaw, Wallace scanned the hall, meeting the eyes of delegates and diplomats. He carried not a weapon, but a will strong as any shield. The high table would be his command post now. His mission: steer humanity from the brink it had just stepped back from. Here, in the government's heart, he would guard peace, Pegasus's legacy a beacon lighting the way. The stars glinted over Earth. Major Carter Wallace gazed upward, alone, his face darkened by shadows. He'd endured much. Now he scanned the sky with new eyes and hope. Footsteps approached. Ambassador Zhang joined Wallace, also looking up. Neither spoke at first. Stars blinked above. Planets shone. "It's a huge galaxy, Major," Zhang finally murmured. Wallace nodded, hands behind his back. "We step out careful, but we do step out." A shooting star flashed and vanished. Both men saw it. Zhang inhaled sharply. "We've shown the best and worst of us," Zhang said, "what we can achieve and destroy." Wallace kept scanning the sky. The galaxy didn't scare him anymore. He felt ready. Earth also ready. "We endured," Wallace said, eyes still upward. "We earned our place, not by force." Zhang's suit rustled as he shifted. "The universe understands now. Don't provoke humans." They chuckled, the sound drifting into the vast night. Earth was no longer an outsider. Gravel crunched under their steps as they walked to the building. Inside, diplomats worked late, screens glowed, soft voices murmured. "We begin a new chapter now," Wallace said before they parted at the door. Zhang looked at him and nodded slowly. "Hopefully, a better one." Wallace stayed outside, feeling the cool breeze. His eyes found the stars again. They promised adventure, trials, new horizons. Humanity now stood among the powerful in the galaxy, a people who'd faced ruin but persevered. They would show the universe their potential, working together, with old enemies, new friends. Wallace's breath steamed as his jaw set. Never again so close to oblivion. Never again underestimate human resolve. Above, Earth's new allies sailed across the night sky. Their ships blinked. Wallace saw them and knew. Earth was ready, would endure, would thrive. He would make it so.